need to be plugged. We discussed the technology roadmap for ADAS as well as the need for a domestic star rating system to spread consumer awareness on safety. Today, we shed light on the engineering aspect of safety and why it's important to develop cost-effective solutions for the Indian market. My name is Mayank Dhingra, and I welcome you once again to this event brought to you by our sponsors, Associate Partner Continental and Technology Partner Henkel. We will have a series of discussions and interviews over the course of the next couple of hours. So without any further ado, let's begin with the keynote address. I would like to invite Mr. Todd Morgan, the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, Lumax. I'm sure you will have plentiful takeaways from Mr. Morgan's address and his expertise in the automotive lighting space. So please take your seats as we begin the webinar. Mr. Morgan, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. So I'll quickly share my screen here. And hopefully you can see it okay now, yeah?
Yeah, it's good to go.
Okay, good. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's really an honor to speak to all of you, especially about a topic that is really so close to my heart. As you mentioned, my name is Todd Morgan, so I'm the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer. I have more than 30 years experience in the automotive, and more than 25 of them actually in lighting. So lighting is very close to my heart. But I will speak to you today about lighting specifically on how it's affecting safety and how the technology is really driving throughout the world different innovations. I'll touch a little bit on how these mega trends of EV and ADAS are also impacting those technology roadmaps, and how we are adapting the way we do development or what we're doing development on. And of course, we need to adapt those to the Indian market. So I'll touch on a few ways that we are working very actively to improve that situation, to take these leading edge technologies and adapt them to the Indian market needs. And last but definitely not least is how do we make these technologies cost effective, and how do we accelerate that level of implementation? So you know, I think these are the main topics that I will talk about throughout the presentation. The first thing I have to mention is what is lighting, and lighting first and foremost is a safety component. It's one of the most highly regulated parts of the vehicle. You know, it's something that we spend a great deal of time on making sure that our products do meet the lighting requirements. But as set makers and also the OEMs and other regulatory bodies, we're all working together to develop the regulations and to modify the regulations to keep up the level of technology. And this is always a challenge because the technology is often moving faster than the regulatory bodies can keep up. You know, there's lots of debates about you know, that this is a safety related item, but we all need to vet the technologies and ensure that they meet the requirements. Of course, it's a styling signature. You know, it's you know, although it is a safety component, you know, the studios have truly embraced the impact that lighting can have. You know, daytime running lamp is a great example. You know, it's definitely a regulatory item, and there's a safety related reason to have daytime running lamp. But the studios are really using this regulatory topic to create the signature of their vehicle. And in the future, you're going to see more and more that lighting is being used as a communication tool. I'll touch on a few of those things throughout my presentation, and of course, advertising tool. You know, and this is the part that always makes me proud, because when there's a vehicle unveiling, you typically see the lights first. You know, you'll see some sort of teaser advertisement, and usually, and it's quite my pleasure when it's my products that are being used as a teaser. So it's really also a very important advertising element here. But again, I have to say that first and foremost, our number one priority, no matter what we do, whether it's a signature or communication or it's a jazzy ad, my number one priority is always safety. And for the entire vehicle industry and the whole lighting industry as a whole, we are focused primarily on improving the safety, not only for the driver, for those around it. I think first and foremost, I think there's no surprise of what my first slide is that there's LED technologies, and LEDs are providing an increased level of performance over halogen. It allows us to scale our technology. We can have basically halogen level performance, and we can continue to smoothly scale that performance over various customer requirements, vehicle classes. We can tune our beam patterns to meet customer needs. There's all kinds of interesting things and flexibility that LED has to offer. The higher color temperature also improves driver comfort and fatigue. The higher color temperature is more closely to daylight conditions, and the result from that is that the drivers who have LED headlamps statistically show less fatigue when driving. And of course, drivers when they're less fatigued, this improves safety. Another big driver for us is lower power consumption. It's a halogen lamp is 55 watts, and we can do an LED headlamp around 12 watts. So or sometimes even 10. So lower power consumption makes it a very attractive thing. So it's lowering our CO2 emissions as well. Simply changing from halogen to LED, you save 1 gram of CO2 immediately. So a lot of OEMs are very interested in this lower power consumption. It's lower weight as well, so you don't have these big reflectors or heavy attachments and all that kind of stuff. So this lower weight and smaller package size also makes it very interesting. We always have to remember that LED is not restricted only to projectors. You see it frequently with projectors. You see these LED headlamps, but the more cost-effective way is also to use reflector technology. So we're not restricted only to projector technology. Cost always remains the issue. To drive the cost down to the halogen. Halogen by far is still the cheapest way to deliver light on the road, but that gap is rapidly closing, and we are working very actively. And I'm going to talk more about the activities that we're doing to further close that gap to allow for a more wider implementation. Advanced front lighting systems is another regulatory change that has been made a little bit in the past, but not too far. Again, it's a significant enhancement in visibility and safety. It's using an algorithm. So we're taking all kinds of signals from different sensors on the vehicle, whether it's steering wheel angle or speed sensors or the yaw rate. There are many inputs that go into that. We have a nice control algorithm, electronic control module with an algorithm inside that basically then controls the lamp. And we can achieve different modes. I show a few examples in this slide, but we can have bending, so static bending, which means you're just turning on and off individual light. Dynamic bending means really the lamp is swiveling, whether that's mechanically or digitally, but the beam will swivel to the left and the right as you turn your steering wheel. Then there's different modes. There's town mode, there's country mode, there's motorway beam, so that you can see a little bit further down the road when you're driving down the highway. Obviously, there's high beam, and then there's adverse weather, and this is more of a safety enhancement for the other drivers, so when you're on a wet road, I think all of us have driven, and you see this glare coming off the wet surface. Adverse weather actually reduces that foreground so that you're not glaring those oncoming drivers. So lots of interesting things, I think, coming on advanced front lighting systems. The more recent regulations that have been released now is what we call adaptive driving beam, so ADB. You'll hear it also called matrix light, or you'll hear glare-free high beam. It's all essentially the same thing. And here we are adapting the beam primarily on high beam based on traffic and environmental conditions. So the customer really feels they have the full high beam on while not glaring oncoming traffic. And I'm here in Pune today, so I always make a little joke that in India people like to drive with their high beams on regardless. But we do need to keep that in mind, that the glaring oncoming traffic is also a safety hazard, and this allows, I think, the best of both worlds. So the driver himself feels he has high beam on, and the oncoming traffic or following traffic feels that you're on low beam. So it's a win-win situation. There's different types of ways to implement this technology. It's a very flexible technology. So you can use it mechanically. You have mechanical solutions. You have digital solutions. You can have single row optic solutions. You can have 2 rows or 3 rows. And I show some examples in the upper right-hand slide there of a 3-row system, for example. And then there's a way we can do fully pixelated beams. And I think this is a big topic, especially you see it right now being implemented with the German OEMs. Audi, for example, has released a projector that does 1.3 million pixels. So it really allows complete control over the beam, and we can declare road signs. We can identify pedestrians or animals with marking light. We can project images. There's all kinds of very interesting things that you can do when you have really completely pixelated the beam. This is a massive step forward in terms of visibility and safety. I would say LED is one step, AFS is an additional step, but ADB is a leap. So it's very important, and I think that this technology will become very interesting worldwide very quickly. Image projection is another cool topic that we're working actively on. There are new regulations now being released in GRE that allow us to project images inside the headlamp, and I show a few examples that are there. It allows the driver to communicate to the driver for improved safety. For example, a snowflake can be projected to warn of a slippery roads condition. There are lane keeping warnings. There is a wrong way warning. There's risk of collision. All these things are really being used using DMD technology today. In the future, there will be implemented micro LED. It will be a more cost-effective solution, but so we continue to monitor as that technology becomes available. I do have to say that there are limitations on the number of symbols and images that are legally able to be projected when the vehicle is moving. Obviously, when the vehicle is stopped, there's all kinds of fun stuff you can do with this same technology. But obviously, when we are on the road and in a driving condition, you need to revert back to the regulation. So a lot of really interesting things coming from this soon to be very released regulation that's now being finalized in GRE. So lots of fun stuff coming. EV has changed a few things for us, and I could probably speak for half an hour on EV alone, but high value technology headlamps. So, they're looking for low power consumption. They're looking for weight savings. They're looking for optimized electronics, all these kind of different technologies that we're working on for reduced power. But at the same time, customers want their EV to look like an EV. So there's all kinds of other additional features and functions that they would like to add there. I just listed a few of them, the personalization and welcome goodbye, charging status, projecting images around the vehicle, innovative signal optics, ADB, as I already mentioned. All these kind of things are also very interesting on a technology-driven car. The difficulty and the challenge is trying to find this sweet spot between power savings, weight savings, efficiency, and the added functionality. And so this is something that we continue to discuss, and I think everyone needs to discuss what are the priorities and how do we find this sweet spot for the EVs going forward. ADAS, another very interesting topic. Lighting, we're located on four corners of the vehicle, and EV in particular. We also have the grille area and the full deck lid to play with. So sensor integration is a very hot topic for us. We're very interested in integrating various ADAS sensors inside. Maybe later we can talk about sensor fusion, and looking at different ways to improve the data that is being processed. But ADAS also remains a very interesting strategy for us. And again, it will be another area where lighting can take safety. And I always joke that us lighting guys, we take ugly technical things and make them look cool. And I think when you look at the early ADAS prototypes, maybe they need some work on the styling. So we can help integrate that and make it look more seamless on the vehicle. And I think there are some other advantages. Now, how do we adapt these things to the Indian market? I think that's the big question. It's we need to drive down the cost, and the first thing is really around standardization. So we need to standardize components across vehicle lines, across customer lines, in order to really drive down the cost. And I always say that you should focus your standardization efforts on components that you cannot see and customize on components that you can see. And I just picked one example, and I think any product line can probably say something along the similar lines. But things like light engines, driver modules, controls, maybe even projector modules, these are the things that are open for standardization. We can customize the plastic bits. So if we don't want our customer to feel like they have a cookie cutter headlamp, we want them to feel that they have something unique with every single vehicle. So these are the kind of topics that we're really working very hard to improve our cost situation. Of course, I can also talk for another half an hour on standardization, but I think you get the message on this single example. The other thing I think is efficiency, and I think this goes for any product line. And I just gave an example here on projector modules. We have a key KPI on lumens per watt, and in this slide I'm just comparing as an example a traditional projector module, and in high beam you see 35 lumens per watt. Whereas we are developing a much more efficient projector using collimator optics and secondary optics. And here we're improving that metric to 42 lumens per watt. And it's just an example, because really in the end of the day, efficiency drives cost. Efficiency drives waste. Efficiency drives power. Efficiency drives performance. So it all, for me in the lighting industry, is driven by optical efficiency, and that optical efficiency cascades through the whole thing. So the more efficient system that I can develop and design, the lower cost I'm able to offer to the customers. And again, the lower cost will definitely accelerate the ability to adapt into the Indian market. We also have to look at high value implementation. I talked about all kinds of fancy dancy technologies at the beginning of this. But how do we find a high value? How do we find a sweet spot on adapting the levels of performance to the challenging cost targets we have? So instead of having 1.3 million pixel headlamp that you might find on an Audi A8, 4 to 11 segment ADB is a very nice beam. It really gives a very high value. The customer would very much appreciate and feel that they are driving in a much more safe environment. Static bending as opposed to dynamic bending. I have this example on the right side. So instead of swiveling the beam, which may be a bit more expensive, simply fading on and off a single beam is a high value AFS technology that comes at a lower cost. High beam boost is another easy one. Yeah, you bring your vehicle up to speed, you add a little extra light or an extra module to do so, and it is a high value technology. So these are just a few examples, I think, on how we deal and discuss with our customers to really try to adapt to the Indian market. How do we do all this? So I think the important thing is developing an organization around centers of competencies, and that's something that has been a big priority for me, and I think that everyone can learn something from this. But the center of competency, they are defining the roadmaps, the standards, the processes, the guidelines, so that the technology is implemented consistently across multiple product lines, and it can be not, in Lumax we have multiple product lines. So our center of competency can, for electronics, for example, could apply to completely different product lines outside of our lighting organization. And the application teams, they're really looking at implementation according to those design guidelines. So here is where centers of competency show some strength. The other place you would put a center of competency is maybe when you want a new skill or a new technology needs to be implemented. You need a really focused team. So here you can basically incubate a new technology in a center of competency in various disciplines. You can also deploy that competency across the organization by focusing on hiring the right people, training the right people, identifying the right partnerships. All of these are driven primarily out of the centers of competency. And I just gave a quick organization chart here, and it's the orange boxes are basically application teams. The blue boxes are basically the centers of competencies. I just picked a few examples here for argument's sake. So you have, for example, system engineering, mechanical engineering, optical engineering, electronic software, going across the different customers or different applications. So the design guides, the standards, the lessons learned, the best practices, the things gone wrong, what to do and not to do. This is shared very quickly and is shared across customer lines. And it ensures that we are a learning organization. And I think that centers of competencies need to be a clear learning organization. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but the advantages here is that you maintain strong customer linkages with the application team. So even though you're specializing and focusing on various competencies, you are not losing that customer link. End of the day, the customer needs to be satisfied, and that's why these application teams remain very important. But we still focus on building competency and leveraging that across the organization. And when you have a larger organization that's maybe global, you need to be sure, even more so, that the different regions are all doing things the same way. Breaking the silos, working together as a team, and really having a system way of thinking is really super important. And system engineering and working as cross-functional teams is absolutely critical to our success. With no one silo alone is going to achieve the goals. We really need to look at all disciplines. There are challenges. I have to say, no organization chart is perfect. Matrix management can be confusing for people. Sometimes the path of escalation can be challenging. So this really requires a leadership that is very team-oriented, very collaborative-oriented. The application team needs to understand the total system, and to achieve the customer requirements, we really need to have that system mindset. And it's super important to drive down the cost, to improve the performance, to look at compressed timelines, and to implement rapidly new technologies. So I guess in summary, my message here is that new technologies are enabling new safety features in lighting. And I just mentioned a few. I'm kind of pressed for time, but LED headlamps, AFS, ADB, these are all amazing enhancements in safety. The mega trends will continue to significantly update our technology roadmaps, and technology roadmaps need to be revised according to our customer requirements, to the trends going on in the industry. We need to keep that alive and continue to adapt. And as you all know, from Darwin, it's those that adapt survive. And I think this is a very important part of how we handle our technology roadmaps. We need to adapt the Indian market, and this is really, I picked 4 ways: standardization, design efficiency, high value implementation, and localized competency. And I think if we focus on those 4 key items, this is going to allow us to take these really great things and leading edge technologies that maybe the German OEMs are working very actively on, and squeeze and modify and optimize the performance and cost targets to really accelerate the implementation in India. And lastly, but definitely not leastly, the organization and mindset shift. And, I showed an example of centers of competency. I think competency, no matter what organization structure you choose to implement, is super key to implement. And the systems thinking and looking at a total system, whether in my case, it's optics, mechanical, electronics, and software, really working as a cross-functional team. This is how you're going to be successful, and this is how you're going to implement new innovative safety enhancing technologies into India. So with that, I would like to thank you for the opportunity, and I think we have some Q&A time, if I recall correctly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Morgan. That was a lovely presentation, taking us through the different aspects of lighting with respect to safety. When we talk about, safety of vehicles and the road safety in India, I have a few questions for you. And, since you are an expert in the lighting domain, we at Autocar, we keep getting a lot of questions from, consumers who are driving these vehicles on a day-to-day basis. Even though these cars, the modern day cars, are coming up with all these, new technologies, the LED project, along with not just reflectors, but along with projectors, people still complain about, the lighting intensity not being adequate when they go out on the highways. So I want to understand from you, in terms of the regulations, so are we at par with the European regulations, or, do you think that there is still scope for some improvement in terms of the regulations for the intensity of the lighting to be, it could be increased a bit further from where we are right now?
The regulation is the same in Europe and India for the most part. Yeah, there are a few minor objections, but for the most part, the regulation is defining the minimum. Yeah, I think here it's about educating customers, and I'm talking about end customers, on what are the different technologies. They need to understand what is AFS. You know, I'm ticking this box. What do I get for that? And I think one of the problems that we have is that, you know, that people buy their cars during the day. You know, so it's very rare that you are taking your test drive on a vehicle at night to look at that. So um, we continue to work with the OEMs to optimize the performance. Obviously, we always have these this cost target. So of course, we can always put more light on the road. You know, this is no problem. But unfortunately, this also comes at a cost. So I think here's where we need to work with the end customers to really educate them on those options. You know, if I want ADB, what is that? Yeah. And show that.
No, but not just ADB, Mr. Morgan. So, you know, whatever lighting solutions you're offering today, you know, you're supplying to a lot of OEMs. So, you know, whatever is there as a standard fitment on a car, is it really adequate for the end customer when he's driving with that particular headlight on the road in the night?
You know, an LED headlamp meeting the minimum legal requirement, which is basically halogen, is 550 lumens on the road, basically what you will have. Yeah. And this is a very nice beam. You know, when we talk about LED itself, the higher color temperature, you feel you have 20% more light on the road. The reality is the lumens is roughly equivalent, but that feeling more comfortable on LED headlamp, I think will give some customer impact as well. So.
Right.
But the regulations themselves, again, it's defining the minimum, and this is no different than Europe. And quite frankly, you know, you know, in the German Autobahn, you're driving 220 kilometers per hour with the same regulation that you have in India. So I do believe that the regulation defining the minimum is robust, because if you increase this regulation, you're only driving up the cost. Yeah, and I would not be able to argue that the driver on a German Autobahn needs less light than you do on your trip between Pune and Mumbai. So,
right.
So, yeah, I think it's the OEMs, however, are not designing lamps to the minimum regulation. Yeah, and in fairness, I do have to state that the OEMs themselves, you know, it's also a competition between them, you know, to define. And you know, if I'm not happy with my OEM A and maybe OEM B has a nicer technology there, that's going to what I think is going to drive it. I don't think it's so much a regulatory discussion.
Okay. So that there lies the answer, you know, that OEMs themselves are not, you know, designing the lamps as per, you know, to meet that the minimum regulation as well. They're keeping it a little lower than that as well.
Yep.
That's a big cause of concern, I would say, you know, because, and do you believe that, you know, you're taking a comparison with the German Autobahn. So do you think infrastructure also has a role to play here?
Sure. I mean, I have to say also, you know, the Indian OEM specification is different than you have for a European one. You tend, and I'm generalizing, you tend to be more concerned about foreground light and less so about distance, which is logical. Yeah, you are not driving 220 kilometers per hour in India.
Right.
So, you know, so I think these environmental factor, your traffic conditions, all those kinds of things, I think also play a fact. But this is all rolled again into the OEM spec. You know, those guys, and I don't want to quote anybody here on the forum, but you know, they take that into account based on their customer. You know, so you will see. Maybe SUVs have a different requirement than the cars that are like city cars. Right. So you do see some difference in that OEM spec, but this is really, again, and I think I have to admit the Indian OEMs are doing a really good job by not saying, hey, I just want a legal lamp. I want to have performance that meets my customer base. Yeah, right. And I think that, again, is the right approach to do things, because regulation should define, hey, this is the bare minimum. The OEM should understand their customer needs and wants and apply accordingly.
Right. You know, there we had, you know, one example recently, you know, one of the Indian manufacturers, I mean, I'll just take the name Mahindra on the XUV700. I'm not sure if Lumax is supplying the lamps, but you mentioned in your presentation the auto booster, the booster headlamp function. So I think in that car, a lot of, you know, I mean, that particular function has received a lot of rave reviews. The amount of intensity it gives you once you cross the speed of 60 or 80 kilometers per hour on the road at the night. I think it really, increases the overall intensity of lighting on the road. So do you think such solutions can become, more prominent going forward in mass cars as well?
Yes, clearly. I think the high beam boost, especially here in India, is a great way, because again, your low beam is tuned a little bit more for the foreground. So when you do have those occasions when you're reaching speed, the high beam boost, especially for the Indian market, is a very interesting adaptation. The same way with static bending. I think dynamic bending is nice for curvy, smooth roads. Static bending is much better attuned when you have animals and people and pedestrians and tuk-tuks and all kinds of stuff on the corners. And here is where static bending is of high value, where maybe it's not so important in other areas of the world. So again, I think looking at those high value things specifically for the Indian market is exactly the right approach. And you gave a very good example of that.
Right. A couple of more questions for Mr. Morgan, even though we have sort of run out of time here. When do we see ADBs coming into the cars, the mass market cars in India?
Yeah. Lumax is now in development right now with an ADB system. So within the next year and a half or so, that Indian OEM will have an ADB system on the road. And we have inquiries from about 3 others. So there are, there's again, it's driven again by that customer base, what's meeting their market. But I have to say that my original technology roadmap had ADB a little bit further out. Because of your traffic conditions, I was a bit skeptical that ADB would be of so much interest. But the fact of the matter is that the marketing from those OEMs seems to be pulling that ahead by at least a year than from what my original prediction was. So it's good news. I think if you ever drive an ADB system, you will immediately love it. It's not like AFS. It's not like halogen to LED. It's really an amazing leap forward in visibility and comfort.
Right. So which category of vehicles can we expect this first to come in?
I think the upper level.
Upper level first.
Upper level, first.
Right.
It's usual. The higher level vehicles typically they test out the technology and then it will trickle down.
Right.
The key here is how fast does it trickle down? And I think I've been in the industry a long time, and that trickle down period is accelerating like you can't imagine. It's from years ago, you would never say, okay, ADB is implemented on an Audi, and maybe 5-7 years from now, it starts to move into the mainstream. That is now moving 2 to 3 years, so really that maybe in a different level of performance, but the technology is trickling down extremely fast now. And I don't think lighting is the only industry that can make that statement.
Absolutely. I think you also answered this question, which was asked by Mr. Mohammed Roshan. So I hope, Mr. Roshan, you've got your answer from Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan, last question. You summarize your presentation by saying that localized competency is also one of the key areas that component suppliers like Lumax are focusing on. Right now we're sort of seeing a situation of global semiconductor shortage, and when you talk about projectors and LEDs, so we're talking about a lot of chips as well. So is this going to be, is this a constraint right now, and is this hampering your overall cost targets as well?
For sure, the semiconductor issue, as for everybody, is impacting the business overall. I don't think that I see this impacting the cost so much. It does not seem to be affecting the chips, LED chips themselves, because I think this is more automotive focused anyway. It's the micros that are a bigger concern. I don't have it as such a big impact in India as for lighting, because our systems have a limited number of these kind of advanced applications. I think if this crisis was happening 2 years from now, I would be crying a little bit louder. But at this point in time, it's not a major impact on us. It definitely impacts businesses in Europe or other areas around the world in terms of the lighting industry. But I think we may have dodged the bullet a little bit on this one. So hopefully the capacity will be in place, and I won't need to worry about that.
Right. So on that hopeful note, thank you so much, Mr. Morgan, for sparing out the time and for taking us through your lovely presentation. Really appreciate your time here. Thank you so
Good.
much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move to our panel discussion for the day. And I would like to invite the three panelists, the three esteemed panelists that we have. Mr. Abhay Manikar, the advisor at ARAI. Mr. Girikumar Kumaresh, Senior Program Manager, Accident Research, Advanced Autonomous Safety Systems, Bosch Global Software Technologies. In this panel, Mr. Girikumar also represents RASI, the Road Accident Sampling System India. And last but not the least, Mr. P.K. Verma, Commercial Engineering and Product Development Head, India, Middle East and Africa, Henkel. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking out the time today and for being here with us.
Thank you, Manak. Am I audible? Just an audio check.
Yes, Mr. Giri, you're audible.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayank. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Verma. Hi, Mr. Manika, sir. Good afternoon to all of you.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see everybody again.
Yeah.
Long time to see, Mr. Manikar. Hope everything is good.
Yeah. So far, so good. Yes.
So it's good that the co-panelists, they are acquaintance with each other already. So it it makes my job easier here. So I would give the first word to Mr. Manikar, being the senior most person here. Mr. Manikar, I would want to have your first opinions about, the overall, the state of road and vehicle safety in India. And, we were in the keynote address, we talked about regulations a little bit. How do you see the evolution of overall safety and standards and regulations in India right now?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. And Mayank, your question on evolution of the safety roadmap for India, which was quite going along with my career path also. So it was long back when we had that CMVR regulation from, and we were trying to build the standard, safety standard. Basically, if you look from the time windows, 5-year time window, first 5 years of from 2000, if you look, India was focusing mainly on building the standard for the safety critical components and their installations on the vehicle. That was the era where ARAI also was quite busy in making standards. But there was no harmonization of the standard till we came back to the next 5-year, 2005 to 2010, when India really signed 1998 agreement under WP29, and the whole policy shifted to align the standards with UNEC.